Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue.
The third and the fourth, I'm going to deal with them together. Madhyamaka. The Madhyamaka school. The Madhyamaka school has these two varieties or two flavors, if you will. The Swatantrika and Prasangika. But let's go slowly. This Madhyamaka school, Madhyamaka literally means middle path. Those who follow Madhyamaka are called Madhyamikas. I remember when I first discussed this with a very great Swami, Ram Maharaj, Swami Mokshadanandaji. He told me in detail about what it means, what is emptiness, what is its relationship to Advaita Vedanta, so on. Very great teacher in Belur Math. And I kept saying Madhyamika, Madhyamika, and I still remember, he corrected me. Madhyamaka. The philosophy is called Madhyamaka. And if you follow it, you are a Madhyamika. Now, these Madhyamikas, they originate with one of the greatest names in Indian philosophy, Nagarjuna, who has fascinated, and 2000 years later, more and more is being written on Nagarjuna now, here in the West, in English. And they're relating it to a lot of modern thought. I will not go there, Gayatri is here. Yes, there are actually books on Nagarjuna and deconstruction and Derrida and also. So fascinating, at least echoes and parallels between somebody who lived 2000 years ago in India. And Nagarjuna wrote this masterpiece, Moola Madhyamaka Karika. Moola Madhyamaka Karika, I think 28 chapters. Fascinating. 28 chapters, where he shows the emptiness of everything. So what is the purpose of this Madhyamaka school? They say that the Chitta Matra, mind-only school, is right so far as they say the self is empty and the other is also empty. But they are wrong when they say the ultimate truth is mind. Mind is also empty. Then what's true? We won't tell you. But whatever you say, mind, God, Atman, Brahman, the Buddha nature, everything is empty. And we will prove it to you. They are hyper-logicians. They always wield the sword of logic. So the Moola Madhyamaka Karika is a very intriguing text. There he takes up everything and anything you can think about. The Four Noble Truths, life and death, past lives and future lives, the causes and effects, cause and effect, causality. The Buddha, empty. Four Noble Truths are empty, shunya. Buddha is shunya. What about nirvana? What about samsara? Shunya. Oh, that's good. Nirvana, shunya. What about all philosophies? Drishti, he calls it drishti. Shunyata sarva drishtina. All philosophies are empty. All philosophies are empty. What does it mean? We'll go into that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's all empty. What does that mean it's empty?
Their goal is Shunyata sarva dharmanam. All entities, whatever you can think about, whatever you can postulate is empty, has no essence at all. And they will demonstrate it with logic. And an initial objection could be, just a minute, Mr. Nagarjuna. What about your philosophy? Your Madhyamaka, all is emptiness. That's a philosophy also. So that's also empty. And he gives a beautiful answer to that. There's a text called Vigraha Vyavartini, refutation of other views. He says, if I had a view, then I could be accused of propounding an empty philosophy. But I have no view. If I have said something, you could refute it, but I am not saying anything. So this goes back to in ancient India, debates were of three categories. Vada, Jalpa, Vitanda. Vada means Tattva Bhubhutsukatha, a debate, a discussion based on an inquiry into the truth. So a teacher and a student, or two genuine inquirers of truth, they might. Then there's another kind of debate called Jalpa, which is Parapaksha Dushanam Swapaksha Sthapanam, cutting down the opponent's view and establishing your view, like a lawyer might do. It's not a question about what is truth, but I want to establish my view, and I want to cut down your view. That's the goal. That becomes the goal in the court of law and in every quarrel that you have ever had. I am right, and I must have the last word, and you are wrong, and I'm going to prove that, no matter what the topic is. So that is Jalpa. There is a third kind of debate, Vitanda, which says that I have nothing to establish, but whatever you try to establish, I'll cut it down. Now that sounds awful, But it isn't. It's actually a very sophisticated form of debate. What these Madhyamakas want to state is that the truth, whatever it is, we will not say it also, it is self-evident. We just want to sweep aside all the clutter of concepts and philosophies. It cannot be grasped. Any philosophical approach is bound to be wrong. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, "Shobai mone kore nijer ghodi thik cholche." Everybody thinks his own watch is running right. And the person who wears 2 watches never knows the time. That was long before modern watches which are connected to the internet, which will give you the exact time because they're connected to the web. But then otherwise, so no philosophy can give you the truth. No amount of concepts will give, conceptual proliferation. They call it prapancha. Conceptual proliferation. That has to be swept aside. And that's what Nagarjuna wants to do.
Very interesting. Wanted to pause a little bit earlier there, but he was talking about how, was it the third one, talking about how I'm not trying to make a point, but I'll disprove your point. That's all. It reminds me of a movie that I wanted to watch because it made that exact same maybe not exact same, but a very similar philosophy. It's a movie called Thank You for Smoking. And it's this guy that the smoking company hired to go around talking in schools and public, and he doesn't refute. I wanted to watch it because it was a very interesting kind of debate that he was talking about. It was so interesting, and essentially, I think I said this before in another video where I heard about this kind of argument or philosophy, I guess you could say, where they don't make a point, but they disprove your point. And that's exactly what I remember him saying in the movie. And I kind of wanted to learn that to see how it's done. And essentially, the movie was very interesting, where he essentially never makes a claim, but he just he makes the other person look like an idiot. And that's the last thing people, and the point of that is just to make everyone see that person as an idiot, but him, he's not disproving anything or trying to make a claim or anything. He just made the other person look like an idiot, which actually he just said, I think it was the second one on this one, but it's very interesting.
How does he do that? I'll indulge myself a little bit, though I'm running out of time, but I want to give you a taste of what fascinated me. When I opened that book, Moola Madhyamaka Karika, one of the early chapters is chapter on walking. Something as simple. Forget nirvana, enlightenment, self, not self, God, Brahman, Atman, forget all that. Something as simple as walking, taking a step. He said, that's also empty. You can't make sense of it. Why? So in walking, there is the walker, there is the act of walking, and the space which is being traversed, the ground which is being walked upon, right? That's very common sense. And then the Nyaya school, which is a realist school, they would say, if you are a walker, if you are walking, you are the one who's walking, the action of walking is in you. You are the doer, you are the agent of that action, and the action is, where is this action? This action is in you. You are walking. Common sense, sort of. Nagarjuna says, who is walking? There are only 2 possibilities. The walker is walking or the non-walker is walking. The non-walker obviously not walking by definition, because they've defined he's not walking. So yeah, we'll say, of course, the walker is walking. But the walker is the one who has already got, by definition, the action of walking in him. So if he is walking, dvirgamanam syat, then he is walking twice. You seem puzzled, but it's a very simple move. It says, who is walking? Walker or non-walker? The non-walker cannot walk because the person who's not walking is a non-walker. So we'll leave him out. The person who's walking is walking. We say that one who's walking is walking. But how do you define a person who's walking? The person who's walking is that person who has got the action of walking. Now, if you attribute walking to the walker, there'll be 2 actions of walking there. You see? So is he walking twice?
I would say the argument here would be he is considered to be the walker because he is taking the walker actions. Otherwise, he would not be the walker. He'd be the non-walker. In order for someone to be the walker, he must have the walker action, at least according from what I'm hearing here. And if he's not taking the walker action, he is not the walker. Right?
What is he walking on? Is he walking on the space that has been already walked on? Or is he walking on the space that has to be walked on? Or is he walking on the space which is being walked on? We will say, of course, he's not walking on the space which has been walked on. That's done. He has already covered it. And the space to be covered, he has not yet gone there. So I guess common sense is the place where he is walking, that place, he is walking on that now. But the place being walked upon, if he walks on that, is he walking twice on that? So if you see what he is doing, you might say these are verbal quibbles. But these were very serious issues for Nyaya philosophers. They were ultra-realists. They took everything very seriously. So if you are real, your actions are real, the place you're doing action is real, so they have to be in some relationship, and yet I cannot verbally describe that relationship. And he uses the same techniques on Buddha, on Four Noble Truths, on Nirvana, on Samsara. He says none of these concepts make sense. They're all empty. And yet they all work. Here he brings in his two truths, two levels of truth. He says the Buddha has taught two levels of teachings. Samvritti Satyam, Paramarthika Satyam. Dve Satye. Two truths have been taught. In the ultimate sense, the absolute truth, everything is empty. Shunyata sarva dharmanam. And I will show that to you logically. But in the conventional sense, in the relative sense, in Vedanta what we call Vyavaharika. Yes, Vyavaharika Satyam. Everything exists. There are people are walking. You can happily walk. Don't be afraid of stepping out, walking around. All of it will work, except that it doesn't make any sense when you examine it logically. So, the two levels of truth. And then Nagarjuna adds there, Samvrittim manashritya paramartham nadigamyate. Without taking refuge in the conventional truth, in the relative truth, nobody attains to that ultimate truth. The importance of this, don't dismiss it as saying, it's all a dream, it's all false, nothing works here, or this is all illogical, it's non-existent. Then you will never attain enlightenment. Because the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, even concept of shunyata, everything is at the relative level. You have to take the help of this relative truth, of scripture and teacher and meditation and ethics, all of that, even though logically you cannot establish them, in order to reach that enlightenment which Buddha is pointing at. So this is Nagarjuna's view. Just a little note on the Swatantrika and Prasangika, not relevant really to us directly, it's a very subtle point. Nagarjuna had a disciple called Buddha Palita, and he wrote a commentary on Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, that text, explaining it. Thank God, because this is very subtle, it's very difficult to understand. See, the language is very simple. If you read the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, even now, new translations are coming out. J. Garfield has a wonderful translation. Mark Sideritz has another new translation. Excellent translations. And also, The Sun of Wisdom by a great Tibetan Lama teacher who has shown these very subtle abstract arguments, how they can be applied in our day-to-day life and free us from suffering. Anyway, so Buddha Palita wrote a commentary explaining all this stuff. Then it was attacked by another master, Bhava Viveka. He wrote his sort of counter commentary on Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and his interpretation is called Swatantrika Madhyamaka. I'll explain the difference. He was again refuted by one of the greatest Madhyamaka philosophers and masters, Chandrakirti. So Chandrakirti, not so much famous in the Indian tradition, his name is important, but really became important in Tibet a few hundred years afterwards. He was part of the Nalanda tradition, and then his works became very important in Tibet. And even now, some of the works translated in English is what we were asked to read, plow through hundreds and hundreds of pages of abstract arguments like what I just told you, but spread over 300, 400 pages. I remember falling asleep over them in the Widener library.
Real quick, so he said they've been refuted? 5915. Let me rewind that a little bit.
It's called Swatantrika Madhyamaka. I'll explain the difference. he was again refuted by one of the greatest Madhyamaka philosophers and masters.
Yeah, so whoops. 59:15. Yeah, that's kind of so are they actually refuted, or did he came up with an explanation that he found acceptable? Because if they've been refuted, that means they're no longer valid, right? Oh man. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear, like, I'm kind of curious about that argument about, okay, are you the where's he walking in? Is he walking in, like, walking in a thing in the past, the future, or present? Obviously, he's walking on the present, but is he double walking on it? It's like, it almost does seem like kind of like being technical with words a little bit. But it's kind of, it's just merely to say, in order for someone to be the walker, he must take the walk action. Otherwise, he's no longer the walker. So I'm assuming that would be good enough. Let me know. I'm kind of curious. Like, obviously, if it's not walking, he's not taking the walking action. If he's taking the walking action, then he is doing the action itself. So the walking action is not the physical act. It's the doing act. It's taking that action in order to do the action. And then... yeah, I mean, jeez. Anyways.
Sleep over them in the Widener library. So, the interpretation of Bhava Viveka is called Swatantrika Madhyamaka, and the refutation and new interpretation given by Chandrakirti, which claims to be faithful to Nagarjuna, is called Prasangika. What's the difference? Very simply, one point and then I'll move on. The difference is this. Both try to refute all other philosophies. Point being that then emptiness will become clear, obvious. It will not have to be stated. But what Bhava Viveka tries to do, the Swatantrika tries to do, is refute, give logical arguments, refute all other philosophies, Buddhist and Hindu and all of that, and then give independent arguments to establish emptiness. This is the Swatantrika view. The Prasangika view, which is the prevailing view, which is the philosophy, is important because it's the philosophy of the Dalai Lama and all his followers, especially the Gelugpa sect, which Dalai Lama heads. All of them, they will. If you ask them precisely, if you ask them what is your philosophy, they'll say we are Tibetan Buddhists. But specifically, they'll say we are Madhyamakas. More specifically, we are Prasangika Madhyamakas. They are very particular on that point. Their point is, if you try to establish emptiness independently with arguments, you are again proliferating concepts, which was the whole point, to sweep aside all conceptual fabrication and to make emptiness an evident, an intuitively evident truth. Nagarjuna has said, Shunyata, emptiness is the antidote to all the poisons of samsara. But he who takes shunyata itself as a philosophy, there is no saving him. He says, Yatha sarpo durgrihita. If you catch a snake by the wrong end, you are not an expert snake catcher. You catch it by the wrong end, you are in serious trouble. The person who thinks shunyata is the truth, I have got it, is finished. Nothing can save him. Because shunyata can save you if you are in samsara and troubled by samsara, it will liberate you. It will give you nirvana. But if you catch on to shunyata and hold it on, that's what the prasangikas tell the swatantrikas. That swatantrika literally means independent argument. Prasangika means what is called a reductio argument. That means, I will prove, whatever you say, I will prove it's absurd. Hopefully you will let go of that concept. Then I will not give you any new concept until you see for yourself the empty nature of all views and the evident nature of reality. I will not say that. Just the empty nature of all views. So this is the difference between the two. And why I'm not going further into it is because it's a technical difference, not really very relevant to us, but in fact, the whole course which J. Garfield taught us, 600-700 years of argumentation on the icy plateau of Tibet by these lamas sitting in the monastery, I think they didn't have much more to do. They to keep talking about emptiness. It was a debate about Swatantrika and Prasangika. It's a very serious issue for them. So, now the dream example. How do the Madhyamakas handle the dream example? They say, look at the person in the dream and the objects in the dream, they are both empty. Which has the mind-only school will say, yeah, that's what we said. So you're an extra clever dude. What new thing do you have to say? Now the Madhyamaka asks, the Prasangika Madhyamaka asks the mind-only school. So they are all appearing in what? So what's real, according to you? The mind is real.
Yeah, the mind.
Like the mind in the dream produces the dreaming person and the things they see in the dream, the mind is real. What is the mind? The mind is a series of instantaneous flashes of cognition.
Interesting. For them to say that, considering that I'm guessing that's what scientists may say what the mind is. The brain and the mind are two different things. I'm thinking again. I'm not too sure. I didn't really follow it, but obviously the brain is the physical aspect, and the mind might be the neurons firing, and how neurons and chemicals are interacting in the brain might be the mind. And I have a feeling. Consciousness though. Is that something physical or is that something like the mind? It seems like it's like the mind maybe, but anyways.
Then Nagarjuna and the Madhyamakas, they will deploy their famous logic. So one way, many ways, but one particular sword they use is single or multiple. So any entity, anything, to exist, it has to be either single or with parts. Single means one entity or something with multiple parts. Then it can exist. These are exclusive and exhaustive. There's no other third alternative. So, for example, if you say fist, there's an example they use. But fist, is it a single entity? Maybe. But now? No. It's comprised of many parts coming together. So fist is not a single entity, it has parts. So it exists. Then where is the original fist? It's gone.
Odd way to say it, you could say hand. Well, then again, I guess the hand comprises of the palm, the fingers, and the thumb. But again, a lot of this definition that we put on things are mostly form and function. Something I've said about Maya, how whenever we have a name for something, is generally speaking form and function. Fist, you ball up your hand. The form and the function of a fist is to punch, generally speaking. or the hand, the form is this, the function is many things.
It's dissolved into parts. Well, those parts exist, but you analyze them, they all have tissues and the fingers, they're separate fingers. Each of the fingers has tissues and cells, and if you analyze further, it'll go down to atoms. Finally, you will say that at least the atoms, the tiniest possible particles exist, and in ancient India, they had this idea of atoms. Kanada, the Vaisheshika philosopher, was one of the earliest to speak about the tiniest possible particle out of which all material reality is created. Nagarjuna says, really, do atoms exist? It need not be atoms. Today we might say protons, neutrons, quarks, or whatever. So the tiniest particle, does it exist? Yes, that's how this universe is built up. So the tiniest particle is single or multiple? If it is single, it has no parts. It's single, it has no parts. Yeah, that's how we define the tiniest particle, no parts. If it has no parts, it has no top, bottom, because top, bottom, sides are parts. If it has no top, bottoms, left side, right side, then there is no way for the next particle to connect with it. Then how will material universe be built up? We came across this thought as little kids when we were introduced to the concept of, in Euclidean geometry, of a point and a line. Point is no breadth, no extension, nothing like that, and yet so many points come together to make a line with extension.
Right, yeah.
Length. Similarly, Nagarjuna asks, if on all the Madhyamakas, this simple argument, tiniest particle without any dimensions cannot build up a material universe. Well, if you say it has dimensions, up, down, side, left, and on, and then it can connect to other particles, then it has parts. It's not the tiniest particle. Then the parts of those particles, do they have parts or are they single? You see?
I'm trying to find an example. But I guess the best one I could think of is something like water. Assuming a drop of water is the tiniest thing in this planet or this world, our existence. It's the tiniest thing that cannot be split up any further. You have two droplets, and whenever those two droplets combine, they become bigger. But there's not necessarily something extra that makes them link together, though. It's it's a it's a natural attraction. I think everything has gravity, I believe, even us. But it's just the larger the mass, the more gravity it has. But because we're so small relative to the Earth, we have very tiny amounts of gravity. And but anyways, just because a water droplet doesn't have like connection pieces doesn't mean it cannot connect. It's just something inherent in the water itself. The smallest particle, it inherently attaches to things. It's just the way it is. It's really weird making an argument saying that in order for something to attach, you must have something to attach it with. Which is, I don't believe, always the case. Kind of like a lake. It's not. It's millions of water particles connected together, but there's not something else to connect those waters together. They're just inherently they clump together. You could kind of say that about just a lot of things. Liquid, generally speaking. Gas, solids especially, although I guess you could say solids kind of have like how do I say, I don't know if they. I mean, I'm not a chemist here, but I know whenever you see atoms and stuff, usually there's like little bridges or something that connects them to make the molecular structure of the atom or whatever it may be, of the substance. But I don't know if that's like if you look at a microscope, it's like, yep, there's that connection. I'm not exactly sure. Honestly, I don't know. But I think it's just something inherent in the atom or whatever the substance is. It inherently has these parts for it. So I don't know if that's a good one or not. I'm not sure. I mean, I get what they're trying to say, kinda, but at the same time, you're perhaps trying to add something to something that's already inherently it has, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. Let me know.
What does this have to do with mind only? We are coming to you now. Get ready for the sword. You say all our experiences boil down to instantaneous flashes of cognition. Now you can see where this is going. This instantaneous flash of cognition, kshanika vijnana, does it have duration or not? Is it single or with parts? If it is single of no duration at all, then it cannot be experience. Experience has a beginning and a middle and an end, no matter how fleeting. The mind-only school says, yeah, it's an experience. So it's a beginning and an end and a middle. The beginning and an end and the middle, then it's not one single flash. It has a duration of a beginning, 1 moment, middle, at least 1 moment, and end, at least 1 moment. So 3 moments, it's no longer one single flash of cognition. And then each of those moments, does it have a beginning and middle or an end? So the whole idea of a mind which is generating this reality, that also drops away. It's empty. The Madhyamaka says you are not wrong, but even this mind you are talking about, the mind-only school, that's also a relative truth. It's also empty. All right, smart guy, tell us what the ultimate truth is. If I tell you, it will be a concept. The ultimate truth, the ultimate nature of things, he says, it's not that whatever you take up, mind, Atma, Brahman, God, world, Buddha, it's not that it exists. Oh, so it doesn't exist. You're a nihilist. It's not that it does not exist. It's not that it both exists and does not exist. It's not that it neither exists nor does not exist. 4 alternatives. Chatushkoti. 4 alternatives. Sunyam, Nagarjuna defines. Sunyam is Chatushkoti vinirmukta tattvam. Emptiness is that which escapes the four alternatives. What is the nature of everything? The world, you, self, God, whatever it is. Not existence, not non-existence, not a combination of existence and non-existence, and neither a denial of both. And he will demonstrate. Whatever candidate you gave, Atman, Brahman, world, consciousness, anything, he will show that it will fall in these four categories, and he denies it. And he'll give you logic, reason to do that. How do you practice this? So in the dream example, what would you do? In the dream example for the Madhyamakas, you notice the emptiness of the person in the dream, emptiness of the object in the dream, both are appearances, as the mind-only school said, and the emptiness of the mind which is dreaming. What do you mean emptiness of the mind which is? This has to be understood carefully. Because we say that, right, I understand whatever happened in the dream and whoever was in the dream, both are appearances and they are not real. But I am the dreamer, I am the dreaming mind, I dreamt it. I exist apart from the dream also. But the Madhyamaka says, do you? Have you any experience of the dreaming mind minus the dream? So yeah, but I'm here in waking. But have you any experience of the waking mind minus the waking? Oh, deep sleep. I am there, but it's in deep sleep. Have you any experience of the deep sleep mind without the deep sleep? Here is the great insight of Madhyamaka. They arise and fall together. Anything that arises and falls together cannot be ultimately real. They are dependent on each other. Chandrakirti gives an example which you will never find in any Hindu text.
109.
Of two sheaves or bales of hay leaning against each other. If you remove one bale of hay, what will happen to the other one? It will fall. Your so-called, for example, you Vedantins or Sankhyans will say you are consciousness experiencing a world. But without the experienced world, is there any consciousness? Without the consciousness, is there any experienced world? They are like two sheaves or bales of hay leaning on each other. Remove one, the other falls also. Both are empty.
Okay. Okay, I get that. If there's nothing to experience, does the experiencer exist? Hold on, I'm gonna pause it. Okay, so I think a bit of the issue is with the deep sleep. So, is there a deep sleep without the deep sleep experiencer? Well, the problem with the deep sleep is the fact that you don't really experience it. But it still remains true that it is dependent on the dream and the awake mind. Because there's going to be moments when you're awake, you're aware of, well, hopefully the things around you. When you go to sleep, you're either unaware or you're dreaming. And between the moments of you being awake, dreaming, or being awake again is the deep sleep portion, or at least when you're not dreaming or anything, which still falls to the fact that the deep sleep is reliant on the waker and the dreamer, or the waker and the waker, or the waker and the dreamer, or the dreamer and the awaker. You know, in between those moments are going to be deep sleeps, and the reason why you know you're in deep sleep is because obviously you're not experiencing anything. I don't know. I definitely need more examples of that, but saying that everything must rely on something, therefore it must be empty. It's kind of my second time hearing this. Don't quite still fully understand it. I do understand some ideas of it, but yeah.
And you leave it at that. The meditation will be, you sit, this is a dream example. Meditation will be, you'll sit in meditation and experience a vast emptiness, and that the dissolution of all problems goes away there. In that emptiness, what appears? Samsara appears if you are unenlightened. In the emptiness itself, samsara appears with fully empty nature, shunya nature. If you are enlightened, in that same emptiness, nirvana will appear. You will appear as a Buddha, you will appear as, the world will appear to you as, having its essential Buddha nature. Everything will be peaceful, enlightened, sublime. Same experience, same reality. In two ways, enlightenment, non-enlightenment, both are empty. Samsara is empty, nirvana is empty. And that emptiness is, don't even say the emptiness is the final truth, then you're catching the snake by the, Okay, so this is the Madhyamaka view. If you stop here, Sri Ramakrishna's, where we started, Sri Ramakrishna's teaching, if you examine the self, if you examine things very carefully, you will find kono shar nahi, no essence at all. Basically, that's what was going on till now. No essence at all. But then there's one more little thing which Sri Ramakrishna adds. Ja ache tai thake. Chaitanya. What remains? What is remains. Consciousness, pure consciousness. Now comes the last part. I've gone well over time, but I must complete this. Are you with me? Are you still? Or have you become empty? So, the last part of this is the so-called Shentong school. Here we enter an area of controversy. Because if you ask Tibetan Buddhists, they say that they stop with prasangika madhyamaka, emptiness. Emptiness of self, emptiness of the other, emptiness of mind also. All the shunyata sarva dharmanam, and stop. But the Shentong school is another school who are also known as Maha Madhyamaka, the great Madhyamaka. They also call themselves Yogachara Madhyamaka. Mind-only school combined, synthesis of mind-only school and Madhyamaka school, the middle path school. What they say is they turn the tables on the Madhyamakas. You have to be more logical than these hyper-logicians. Have you seen, some of you must have seen the Tibetan Buddhists debating and all, the way they have their gestures and gesticulations and movements. So those are, mostly they are Gelug monks. They are these prasangika madhyamakas. You say something, he'll cut you down. And they have an elaborate, almost dance-like movement to demonstrate this. Professor Arindam Chakravarti was here. He demonstrated some of those moves to us upstairs in the dining hall. What the Shentong school says, you, the Madhyamakas, say in this vast emptiness, samsara arises and nirvana arises. But why? If it is only empty, why would just bare emptiness appear as anything at all? There should be nothing. There should be nothing. And yet, there's always the quality of awareness, knowingness. In samsara, when you are suffering, as a Buddha, when you are fully enlightened, every time it's an experience. There is a phenomenological feel to it. There is a light which illumines everything. You cannot deny that. If you deny that, O Madhyamakas, you will end up as nihilists, as nothing. And that Nagarjuna himself refutes. He says, those who call us nihilists, they do us an injustice. We are not saying that nothing exists. So you say that something exists, The Shentong Buddhists, the Shentong, technical term is Shentongpa. Shentongpa means the person who practices Shentong or holds on to Shentong view. They say, the Shentong view says that this emptiness, the Madhyamakas are right, the Prasangika Madhyamakas are right, but this emptiness is luminous. They call it the clear light of the void. What is this clear light of the void? It is pure consciousness, pure awareness. Now I can see some of you going, aha, now we come to the point. It sounds like Advaita, yet it does, very much so. In fact, one of the great masters, I was researching it on the net, great Tibetan masters, contemporary. It says, he reluctantly admitted there is no difference between the Shentong view and Advaita Vedanta. The final view of emptiness, the fifth view, and Advaitic view, he says there is no difference, reluctantly admitted. Then this samsara appearance, it is empty. Nirvana appearance, it is empty. But why this experience is going on at all? This emptiness must have a luminosity to it. They call it the clear light of the void. And then immediately the Madhyamaka will say, but if you say there's a clear light of the void, whatever it is, I will cut it down. You will be victim of the Madhyamaka logic. The sword is waiting for you. Then here comes the beauty of the Shentong move. This Shentong move says, you are using the sword to remove all concepts, right? Yes, nishprapancha. Prapancha means proliferation of concepts. I'm removing all concepts. This removing all concepts with the sword of logic is also a concept. After removing all concepts, when enlightenment arises, because it did arise for the Buddha, when you realize the clear light of the void, there's a subtle, very subtle concept in the mind of the Madhyamaka meditator, which says, this too has to be cut down. But it cannot be cut down. It is irreducible. It is not an object of any conception. The Madhyamaka will say, you are just importing the mind-only school in a new name. It's again, you're saying mind is appearing. But that mind and this pure consciousness are not the same thing. In that mind is an appearance of an experiencer and an experience, subject and object. Those experiences have beginnings and ends. They are limited in time. They're limited by the nature of that experience, content of that experience. They're entirely objective. But this is not an object, what we are talking about. Language cannot objectify. That's why there's great difficulty in trying to talk about it. Then the Madhyamaka will not let you go, Prasangika. He will say, then why talk about it? Why teach it? Then a very beautiful answer is given by the Shentong. 5 reasons. 1, there are those who feel so self-deprecating that I cannot be that limitless awareness. They will not even start on the spiritual path until this teaching is given. You do not sorrow, do not be afraid. You have the Buddha nature. You have the Tathagata Garbha. You have the ultimate nature in you. This teaching has to be given in words. 2nd, there are those who are very proud. Spiritual pride. That also is poisonous. This Tathagata Garbha, this Buddha nature, this clear light of the void is for everybody, enlightened, unenlightened. You have no special reason to be proud about it. I remember this monk in our monastery once, brilliant person, but a little troubled, I think, because he said, I'm going to write a book about this person who's enlightened. And he's enlightened, he behaves like an ordinary, in fact, even a foolish person outside. Internally, he's enlightened and he's full of contempt for all others. I said, that doesn't sound very enlightened. So, to cut down spiritual pride that I am something special, immediately what is called reification. You have reified a personality who is special, enlightened. No. That's why this teaching must be given. 3rd, to prevent this mistake which you Madhyamakas make of trying to prove the emptiness of that ultimate reality also. That teaching must be given. And then the 4th is, I think, to inspire all beings that, this feeling that all beings have, we are small. The exact words are, we are stained, we are sinful, we are limited. To remove this feeling that you have all these problems, but really underneath, beyond all this, you have the Buddha nature. You have the nature of the clear light of the void, in which entire samsara manifests, entire nirvana manifests. You are that reality. This teaching has to be given. And finally, very beautiful, he says that every being shares that Buddha nature. To know that, you feel that kinship, oneness with everybody, to begin with, not at the end of enlightenment. Right now, all of us are that one clear light of the void. And then you can have compassion and service for others. When I read that, immediately, Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva, I was thinking, Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. So this is the clear light of the void, which the Shentong interpretation. Now, the Shentong interpretation is not well known, because it was practiced by a group of monks in a monastery called Jonang. That monastery was later occupied centuries ago, and the books were destroyed, and all the monks there were converted to the Prasangika Gelug school. So it was sort of suppressed. But it is there, even in the other schools of Tibetan Buddhism, it's there not as a philosophy which is taught, but part of their meditation practice, part of their tantra practice. See, here, I'll just add, the Prasangika Madhyamakas are not the villain of the piece, because they have a point. If you state these things, I'm not saying you're wrong, they're saying to the Shentong school, but if you state these things, these will immediately become concepts which are wrong, which are empty. So, philosophy will go up to Prasangika Madhyamaka, clear all concepts, the rest is up to meditation. By meditation, you will have an intuitive realization. The Shentong school says, what is that intuitive realization? We should state it also. We should tell it, in spite of your logic chopping. dream example, I'll give that, and meditation, and stop. The dream example in the Shentong school is very close to the mind-only school, but you'll see the difference. In the mind-only school, you see that whatever you are seeing in the world is like a dream, and the person who is seeing is also a manifestation, and the underlying truth is mind. And in the meditation that you do in the mind-only school, the focus is not on the mind. The focus is on the emptiness of the object and emptiness of the self. And both are non-dual because they are appearances of the same mind. In the Shentong school meditation, what they do is, and the dream example, notice the person who is experiencing and what they experience are manifestations of the mind. Similarly, just as, this is the beautiful example they gave in dream example, Shentong school, just as the same mind can manifest good dreams and nightmares, being the same mind. Both the good dreams and the nightmares are empty because they are dreams. But the mind which is manifesting them is real. Similarly, the clear light of the void, which is your real nature, manifests samsara and nirvana. When you do not know that you are the clear light of the void, this world will appear to you as samsara. When you know you are enlightened, this world itself will appear to you as nirvana. That is the dream example for the Shentong school. And then meditation is very powerful. The meditation is, don't do anything. Sit quietly. And whatever arises, let it arise. Because all of it is a manifestation of the clear light of the void. It's right there. Every moment of experience, dissolve it and see the clear light of the void there. Just let it be. No technique is necessary. No effort is necessary. You just keep seeing the clear light of the void in every experience, moment to moment. Again reminded me of Kena Upanishad. Pratibodha viditam matam amritatvam hivindate. In every flash of experience, if you realize that pure consciousness, you will attain immortality. Almost like a mirror image. So these are the 5 stages of emptiness and meditation on emptiness. Very quickly, less than 1 minute, summing up all the 5 stages. The first we started long way back. You were thinking, oh, what was that? Well, our descent into nothingness is the Shravaka school, the Theravada school, which said the 5 skandhas. There is no self here. If you examine the I, you will not find here. Stage 1 of, and then there's meditation associated with that. In dream example also you see, the person in the dream is not a real person. Second, the mind-only school. Not only the person is without self, the object which you are seeing, the world, that is also without self. That's shunya. Person is shunya, and the subject is shunya, and the object is also shunya. That is emptiness. But mind is real. Third, the Madhyamaka school, both Prasangika and Swatantrika, they say mind is also not real. Mind is also shunya. And they use logic to prove that any concept is empty. And whatever is, we will not talk about it. Shentong school comes, the 5th one, they say we will talk about it. Because otherwise what you are saying does not make sense. If you say what we are talking about is another concept, will cut you down. No, that's your concept. That everything has to be cut down by logic. No. And that's also something that they say, because of long practice of dispelling illusion, cutting through illusion, when enlightenment arises, there is a tendency that let me try to cut this down also. But if you cut it down, it's the same clear light of the void in which you are cutting down whatever you think you are cutting down. So Shentong school ends up with emptiness is the clear light of the void. The luminosity of emptiness or whatever, the multiple terms they use, sounds a lot like Chaitanya, Chit, Samvit, Satchidananda, like that. So this is our journey into Sunyam. As you can see, it is not nothingness. It is far more than it. Is it the all? Is it the Purnam? Is it the complete? We will see next time. Let me do a peace chant and then I have an announcement. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
So I did actually save the other version that we was talking about. Perhaps next time we'll react to that one, whenever Swami Sarvapriyananda's time. So this is so confusing for the most part. It's really weird, although I will say that the 5th one, does sound very similar to essentially Advaita Vedanta, which Swami Sarvapriyananda pointed out that the last monk hesitatedly said that it's very similar. It's really weird though to say that nothing is nothing, and it's very interesting that you reverse their thought process by saying, oh, your concept of destroying concepts needs to get destroyed as well. So they pull out Uno reverse card on that person. It's like, oh no. It's a very interesting thought, though. I kind of want to look a little bit more into that one. It's not. What is it? It's emptiness, but it's not nothing, which is really weird to say. So and they're saying it's not something either. It's like, what? It's not nothing. It's not something. Which he did point out the four. Can't remember what he said. I know it's not something. It's not nothing. It's not nothing. It's not something or something along those lines. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, again, this is, watching that video one time and without elaboration on it, it's very much confusing. And if you guys know about that, about that particular school, that seems kind of interesting. Definitely need to look that up and maybe do a little bit of video reaction to that, just because the concept of nothing. I mean, then again, that's what Buddhism believes in as well. Well, not nothing, but there's no real there's no real thing called Atman or Brahman. It's just momentary glimpses, I believe. But anyways, that's my reaction to Sunyam, The Void by Swami Sarvapriyananda. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.